Good evening, everyone. I'm Shruti Sharma, Associate Director and Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. On behalf of ORF, Carnegie India, ECSTEP, and the Gates Foundation, it is my privilege to welcome you all to this event on AI for All, Reimagining Global Cooperation. Artificial intelligence is no longer a future technology. It is reshaping the world right now, from the hospitals of Nairobi to the agricultural fields of Gujarat, from the classrooms of Togo to the legislative chambers of Westminster. The question before us is not whether AI will transform our societies, it is who this transformation will serve and whether it will leave anyone behind. Organized on the sidelines of the India AI Impact Summit, today's discussions will explore how AI is reshaping global cooperation and development. Our sessions are designed to set the stage for critical conversations around South-South cooperation in the AI era, examining how emerging economies can collaborate to ensure AI truly works for people and not just for profits. A few housekeeping notes before we begin the sessions for the day. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent mode. The session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channels. Please also engage with us using #AI4All. I would now like to invite Dr. Sameer Saran to deliver his welcome remarks.
Thank you, Shruti. You've all had a very long day, so thank you for being with us on this very important occasion of a South-South dialogue that Rudy and his team hosted through the day. I believe there were 200 of you from all parts of the world trying to make AI work for people, and I think that's the theme, AI for people, that we are engaging on today at this particular event, but also I think through the week. The Impact Summit is really about how technology and society can lead to a future that benefits all, lifts all, and is inclusive. So in that spirit, this particular evening we'll witness a few conversations and discussions, and hopefully it will support the larger agenda of the Impact Summit week that we celebrate at this particular point of time. Let me acknowledge His Excellency, the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of UK, Rishi Sunak, who's with us, and he'll be speaking to us soon. Let me also acknowledge His Excellency Saeed bin Mubarak Al-Hajeri, Minister of State for United Arab Emirates, and he's going to be on the stage soon as well. And of course, Excellencies and friends, thank you for your support and your leadership to this particular initiative of the Observer Research Foundation. Let me tell you, there are 600 odd events happening in the city, and let me tell you, Rudra and his team are hosting 25 to 30 of them in different locations. So please join me in applauding Rudra and his team for the fantastic work that they have done through the day. And I hope that all of us can truly see that AI in New Delhi meets people. This is where we democratize technology and make everyone participate in its future. It may seem random, it may sometimes seem chaotic, but I'm telling you, this is a festival of technology. It's a festival of AI, and AI will never be the same again. So this is where literally, I think the Indian enthusiasm, energy, and democracy will embrace this particular medium forever. So thank you for joining us once again. And can I turn it back to Shruti to take the evening forward? Shruti? Over to you.
Thank you, sir. It is now my privilege to invite Dr. Aparna Ray, Joint Secretary, Policy Planning and Research, to deliver some remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Delhi, and welcome to the first AI Summit at the Global South. I start by commending ORF for their fantastic work in curating these excellent and diverse group of speakers and topics ahead of us. I speak as a policymaker that the coming discussion is of particular relevance to me, and that is because as a practitioner, I know that very soon people like me, laypersons, will be sent out from many countries of the Global South to do battle, or should I say to negotiate, on what the landscape of new AI is going to look like. So here I have one request and a small addition to the list of excellent questions that ORF has put before you. And that is this: what are the specific normative guidelines that need to be put in place to have a global jurisprudence of the global south? In other words, how do we ensure that in the coming age, issues of inclusion, equitable access, sovereignty are not seen as exceptions to or concessions from a global norm, but are seen as part of the norm itself? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and I wish you fantastic discussions ahead. Welcome to Delhi once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to invite Mr. Ankur Vora, Chief Strategy Officer and President, Africa and India Offices at the Gates Foundation, to deliver some remarks.
Respected ministers, distinguished leaders, friends, colleagues, welcome to Delhi and a very good evening to all of you. Over the last few days, we've seen extraordinary innovation, remarkable models, powerful tools, breakthrough capabilities. But tonight, I want to focus on something else. I want to talk about impact. Innovation builds models, impact changes lives. Earlier this week, I was in Andhra Pradesh, and I met a smallholder banana farmer. She showed me how she used an AI-enabled advisory tool to identify a pest attacking her crop. She took a photo, sent it in, and within 48 hours, there was a drone spraying pesticide and solving her problem. She didn't talk about innovation. She talked about saving her crop. She talked about protecting her income for a season. That is impact. Across Africa and much of the global south, challenges are real. Farmers facing climate volatility, health systems managing workforce challenges, teachers closing learning gaps with limited resources. So the question is not whether AI can do impressive things. The question is whether it improves outcomes in places that require it. When innovation becomes impact, three things are going to happen. One, public systems become more responsive, more local, more understandable, more usable in the languages people speak. Two, we move from one-size-fits-all to the right customized solutions, right fit solutions, right advice at the right time, at the right place. And third, we increase impact per dollar. But impact does not happen automatically. Much of advanced AI development is concentrated in a handful of countries and a handful of companies. Training data remains skewed towards a few major languages. If we are not deliberate, innovation will move faster than impact. So impact requires choices. If it doesn't work in low bandwidth situations, it won't create impact. If it doesn't function in local languages, it won't create impact. If a frontline worker cannot use it, it won't create impact. At the Gates Foundation, our goals are clear. We've got three goals right now. One is no mother and baby should die of a preventable cause. The next generation should grow up in a world with no infectious diseases, and hundreds of millions of people need to escape the clutches of poverty. They are not innovation goals, they are impact goals. And we will not reach them with technology alone, but technology can be a very big enabler. So, history is not going to remember us for the models we created. It will remember us whether we improved lives. So let's celebrate innovation today, but let's be judged by impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vora. There's a slight change in the agenda, but it is my privilege and honor to invite Prime Minister Sunak, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the force behind hosting the landmark AI Safety Summit, for a conversation with Dr. Rudra Chaudhary, Vice President at the Observer Research Foundation. Please, sir.
Prime Minister Sunak, welcome to AI for All. I believe there's a dinner tonight, so we're all going to move the schedule as fast as we can and get the most out of your time, Your Excellency. Opening gambit, you are the person behind the Bletchley Park conference that started this entire Global Summit series, and this is why we're here today. Just give us a sense, Prime Minister, of what was going on in your mind. What was the purpose of that particular summit?
Well, first of all, good evening, Rudra. Good evening, everyone. Great to be with you. When I became Prime Minister, the kind of foreign affairs team in Downing Street, they sit you down and they walk you through your travel calendar for the year ahead. And it turned out there were quite a few international summits. In fact, there were summits on every single topic that you could imagine, some 150 in all. And the Foreign Office, they want you to go to all of them, which I couldn't do. But I noticed on that list that there wasn't a summit to discuss what I thought was the most transformative technology of our lifetimes, and indeed probably the thing that is going to shape our entire countries, societies, economies, more so than any other force while we're in office. And that's, of course, AI, which is a general purpose technology. And we're lucky to live at a time when this technology has come along, because they don't come along that often. And I felt, given the far-reaching implications, it was sensible to bring policymakers, leaders together to discuss it, but to do it in a slightly different way. And that was to involve the companies that were developing the technology as well. Now, traditionally, that they wouldn't feature in a G7, G20 format, but I thought it was important because ultimately this research at the frontier was happening in these companies. It wasn't happening inside government R&D labs, so they needed to be at the table alongside leaders. And if you just to think this year alone, the big tech companies are spending 20 times more than the United States spent to do the Manhattan Project, which was obviously a central technology development of its time. So given that, it made sense to bring these groups together, and that was the genesis for the first AI summit in the UK at Bletchley Park.
So you got 30 countries together, amazing accomplishment. You got equal number of companies or more in the same roof. And I'm guessing you had a fair bit of argument and debate, and we've all read the Bletchley Declaration. But for you as the Prime Minister at the time, and now a private citizen, when you look back, what would you say was the key lesson for you? What did you get right? What could you not do at Bletchley?
Yeah. Well, I think first thing, there was some skepticism about whether you could bring these politicians, leaders, and all these entrepreneurs, innovators together, and whether they would understand each other. Now, my officials were a bit worried about this, about how I would handle that. I don't have a STEM background, much to my parents' great distress. But the officials are like, "Are you sure you're in the room with all these very smart engineers?" And I did kind of gently point out. I said, "Hang on a minute here." I was like, my wife's uncle is a astrophysics professor at Caltech. My brother-in-law is a computer science PhD, and my father-in-law founded a software company. If I can survive family dinner with my in-laws, I can survive the summit, which just about proved to be true. But I think the nice thing coming out of that summit was obviously the creation of these AI security institutes to help us manage some of the risks that the technology poses, to give people reassurance about that. But I think crucially that the debate has shifted over the years since then. And I think the AI debate has shifted from technology to strategy, from what these tools can do to what countries are choosing to do with them. And I think for political leaders, AI can't be some specialist subject on the side. It's got to become the central responsibility of government. And I think that's what we're seeing at this summit, with the focus rightly on impact.
So, Prime Minister, you talked about technology and you talked about use. Now, it seems to us it's pretty clear that the tech is building out way beyond the deployment of use. If you turn to the newspaper on every given day, the big story is winning the AI race. Some good friends of yours want to win it faster than others. It's all about AGI, but you've got a slightly different view on what winning the AI race actually means. Just unpack that for this audience.
Yeah, I think history. Well, I tell you, when I left office, someone gave me a copy of a book by a professor called Jeffrey Ding called Technology and Great Powers, and it looks at the history of these great technological revolutions and proves out the thesis that even if you're the country that didn't invent this great technology, you could be the country that benefited from it the most, stretching all the way back to the printing press. And I think actually India is recognized that leadership in technology doesn't just depend on inventing the technology, it's about how effectively you deploy it. And so by focusing on mass adoption here, I think obviously supported by a deep talent pool, strong digital public infrastructure, and a public which is very supportive of the technology, I think India is well positioned to be a leader in AI and actually demonstrate mass adoption and deployment in society. And I think actually that is reflected now in how other people view it. If you look at Stanford's rankings of global AI superpowers, India's moved into 3rd place. And I think that demonstrates that this focus on adoption and deployment is working here. And I certainly think that that is the way that you are going to bring the most impact to the most people, by focusing on that side of things.
So it would seem to me that, I mean, after you left office, you've kept this bridge open between frontier labs, private sector, policy and politics. What needs to happen? Because adoption and diffusion is something that we're all here to debate through this entire summit. It's called the Impact Summit. What do we need to do for this impact to actually work for people, for humanity?
Well, I think if you look around the world, there are very different attitudes towards AI, Rudra. Here in India, there is incredible optimism and trust, whereas actually in the West, I think the overriding feeling is one of anxiety at the moment. And in order to close that confidence gap, I think that is now not just a technology task, it's a policy task. And I think it's in the public sector, actually, that this battle for trust in AI will be won or lost. And then when citizens start to actually experience better healthcare, more effective government services, faster response times from the state, I think this debate on trust and AI trust goes from abstract to real. So I think this is something that I urge policymakers and leaders to focus on. You know, if you can adopt this in your public sectors, which ultimately are a big part of our economies, and demonstrate to citizens that it will make their lives better on a day-to-day basis, I think that is a necessary precondition to winning people's trust and actually starting to get the benefits of it.
So just on trust, if I could ask you is, so if you go to the expo on the AI Summit, it's fantastic. I spent 90 minutes there. It's thronging with students. It's people asking the right questions. There's a general sense that this stuff could actually be optimistic and take us to different places when you're largely in the global south.
Yeah.
But in the north, there's a slightly different view. There's a high degree of skepticism of what this can do. And now the differential is becoming quite apparent. What drives this differential?
Yeah, let me, if I may, unpack both sides of what you said. Let's talk about the positive first. And that's something that I think actually probably the most powerful thing about this technology and AI is I think it is uplifting. And as much as we focus on the economic growth that it will bring, and it will do that, and for me, it's that story about not just raising the ceiling, but lifting the floor that I find the most compelling and inspiring about AI, and is a big focus of this summit. And if you think about those global public goods, healthcare and education, right, we're on the cusp of a moment where they can be brought to people who previously did not have access to the best healthcare, the best education. Whether you're in a rural village in Africa or a school in rural India, to have this technology working for those people to lift, as I said, the floor, not just here, but around the world, I think is one of the most positive stories about AI. And I'm really pleased that Prime Minister Modi has made that a focus of this summit, and India is taking a lead on demonstrating that impact. So that's why I think there is an enormous amount of positivity in many parts of the world for that story. And we heard some of it from our colleague from the Gates Foundation earlier. Now, the flip side, as you said, is the anxiety that many in the West feel. And I think a lot of that is around jobs. And I think we have to be clear that AI is going to change the labor market. Some jobs will go. I think many more will be redesigned. I think history shows us that societies thrive when we manage these transitions well. And I think the role of government is not to stop the innovation, but it's to support people to take on these new tasks, new roles with confidence and security. And that's the task for policymakers. How do we redesign education systems? How do we upskill our in-work population? How do we embed digital literacy across the population? We've got colleagues here from the UAE who are taking a lead, particularly on that side of things. And I think that's the challenge. Policymakers need to provide that reassurance to their citizens that they will manage that transition well, so that people's anxiety is lessened.
So I want to just turn your attention to, you said this stuff has to work for health, for education, for agriculture, for people. Our experience has been that the frontier, there's a big gap between, say, California and the global south. That gap existed until about 6 months ago. The one thing we've noticed is the run-up to this summit, the gap started closing. So your big companies, Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, they woke up and said, we got to get into this game. Do you genuinely see frontier labs wanting to play in this game of adoption in these particular sectors, where frankly the revenue model is still quite murky?
Yes, I do. Let's just take India for a second. I mean, you're starting to see just the incredible announcements. You and I were discussing coming in, the announcements from some of these frontier labs, not just about the dollars of investment that they're putting into a country, but actually the practical applications that they're developing here. Why are they doing that here? You think about the ingredients that India has. It has one of the deepest pools of AI talent anywhere in the world. If you're a frontier lab wanting to innovate, why would you not want to come and do things here when you have access to a talent pool? When talent is scarce, by the way, real high quality AI talent, that it's in abundance here. Second thing, digital public infrastructure. Now, I know many actually people here take it for granted because they're so used to it now. But to give you a perspective, other parts of the world do not have Aadhaar. They don't have UPI. They certainly don't have, other than the UAE maybe, Ayushman, Bharat health accounts, right? Like these things, India has leapfrog ahead of many countries. And what they do is provide the distribution rails where you can develop a product that can be distributed to 1 billion people in a trusted, digitally verifiable way. That's extraordinary. And then the last thing, as I said, is this positivity in India that you see for this technology. Now, people don't adopt a technology that they're fearful of or they don't trust. If you're doing something in India, you're doing something in a place where people are hungry, excited, they're positive to use it, to get the benefits of it. So again, it's why people are coming here. I think those are 3 pretty critical ingredients. And the last thing I'd say is, and having spent time with many Indian entrepreneurs over the course of today, you can just see the energy in the ecosystem here. And you know it, whether you see it. What's happening here on the startup ecosystem, the venture ecosystem is extraordinary. And if you might be sitting in Silicon Valley, sure, of course that's an exceptional place. But then you start looking at, well, who else is producing the most unicorns in the world? Who is putting the most investment into AI consumer applications? The answer is here.
The answer is here. What's the answer going to be tomorrow, day after, that satisfies Rishi Sunak? What do you want to see as the outcome of the India AI Impact Summit?
We touched on, we touched on the things that are on top of my mind. One is this democratization of AI and making sure that no matter where you are, which country you're born in, your circumstances, this technology is going to improve your life. And health and education are probably the most fundamental ways that you can change people's lives for the better. Making sure that this technology works for that, I think, is critical, and I'm glad is a focus. We touched on the safety side of it. I think seeing strong collaboration between AI security institutes, governments investing in that capability to understand the risks that this technology brings, I think is critical for winning public acceptance for the technology and to make sure people trust it. And I think there, we just need to make sure that people don't forget that. It's not sufficient for the labs themselves to mark their own homework. It's important that governments independently can do that as well. And then the last thing, as I said, is on this employment point. I have 2 young girls, and I think about their lives ahead. I want to make sure that they are equipped to succeed in this new AI world. Now, of course, they need to be AI literate. All young people do. They need to learn how to manage a team of agents, which, when you start a career in your 20s, you're not managing anyone, but our 20-year-olds will have to do that. They'll have to focus on the human skills, and maybe this is a good note to close on, because AI can do many things. AI will have an enormous amount of knowledge, but we should never forget, knowledge is not the same as wisdom. And that is the purview of all of us. And as long as we don't forget that, I think we'll be in good shape to face the future and benefit from it.
That's very well said, sir. 5 seconds, last question, unfair and cheeky. Where would you like the summit to go next?
Are you talking geographically or metaphorically?
You can choose.
Well, I'd certainly not, no, I shouldn't get involved in that, but I'm sure those conversations are happening. I mean, like our colleagues, I'm going to tee up our colleagues from the UAE who are here. Look, there's an extraordinary story. We've been talking about adoption, diffusion, making sure citizens get the benefits. I mean, anyone who's been to the UAE has seen that. This was a nation which had the world's first AI minister. But what's extraordinary is they didn't just have that a few years ago. They had him in 2017. And they've been thinking long and hard about how to make sure that the country is ready for AI, that's getting the benefits of it. Anyone who's visited there and seen the healthcare system or the new AI literacy skilling programs will feel like they're standing in the future already. So I think that is a great example for us all to learn on. Look, but last thing for me is, when I started this summit, the most important thing was that people came together regularly. So the fact that we're here years later, having gone to South Korea, Paris, and now India, I think is testament in and itself that we are able to come together to discuss the most defining technology of our time and make sure everyone everywhere gets the benefits of it and we develop it safely.
And I think on behalf of all of us, thank you for getting this started. Thank you for being here, Rishi Sunak.
Thanks very much, Rudra. Thank you.
Prime Minister Sunak, thank you so much for this thought-provoking conversation. And I think it's a great segue for our next conversation. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Saeed bin Mubarak Al-Hajeri, Minister of State at the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for a conversation moderated by Dr. Samir Saran, President of the Observer Research Foundation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shruti. I think in some sense, Prime Minister Sunak has done the introduction for you. The minister for one of the most promising geographies when it comes to technology, where society is actually being empowered through digital means, where businesses and trade is being accelerated by creating virtual trading corridors, and where impact is seen on a daily basis. But before I begin my conversation with you, let me acknowledge Mr. Amitabh Kant here. Mr. Kant, before you came in, I was just saying that this is the place where AI is going to meet real people. India is where AI shall meet humanity in many ways. When Mr. Amitabh Kant was the Sherpa for the G20, he moved the G20 from a banker's G20 to a people's G20. He made G20 a celebration of people. And in some sense, the AI Impact Summit in India, I believe, is going to be truly transformational. Humanity is going to finally embrace AI. It's not going to be a hyperscaler's AI. It's going to be the people's AI. And I think that transformation is something that we should be working towards. But Minister, thank you for joining us. Let me ask you the first question. As you can see, when people speak about India, they invoke UAE all the time. We are not only part of the Arabian Sea community, but in our journey in the recent past and in the future, we seem to be walking together. The visit by His Highness, the President to India, and Prime Minister Modi focused to a great degree on this technology partnership. So how do you see this bilateral relationship evolving?
Thank you so much for hosting this. And I think the title of this summit is spot on. I think the evolution of AI or understanding of AI, be it at the government level or even at the companies level or at the individual level, it moved from kind of a defensive kind of risk-averse approach over a few years ago into more embracing, and now we're reaching kind of a climate where everyone is excited. And I think no place is better to host such a level of excitement like India. I think you've alluded to the link between UAE and India. You know, I get the same thing every time we mention UAE, India is mentioned. So we get that also from the other side. So I think it's not a surprise with more than, we're reaching 100 billion of trades between our country, you know, in 2025. More than 700 flights a week between UAE and India. Not a lot of people know the number. So it's 700 flights, more than 700 flights a week between UAE and India. I think the link strategically between the leadership, between the businesses and the people, make it very easy for, be it historic or more recent. And I think we were discussing earlier, even the link now with the Generation Z, into how they look at UAE and how UAE look at India is really strategic in the sense of an opportunity for both countries. So we're very much strategically aligned at a bilateral level, but also at a multilateral level when it comes to AI or other subjects.
You know, we heard in the previous discussion that the purpose of the founders of this process was to bring people together. We are in a highly politicized world today, highly polarized world today. I want your reflections on how do we get people to talk? What's the role of UAE? What's the role of India? Are we actually destined to be doing this job of bringing folks together?
I think India for sure. I think UAE try also to play the same role, but I think we always look at India as a natural leader when it comes of putting people together. I think India has taken the leadership of the Global South and representing the voice of Global South, be it directly as India or be it at the different multilateral, be it at the UN level or at something I'm participating in, representing UAE in the BRICS, also at the G20. I find in India a great partner when it comes to finding the sweet spot between all these divergence and politically motivated subjects. I always find in India a good balance, a good reflection into what makes sense and putting people together. So India has that clear role globally, a respected role also. And a lot of countries and a lot of institutions run to India to make sure complex subject can be shaped in the best interest of all rather than representing a few. And I think no other subject like AI is needing that type of leadership. And I think such opportunity are great opportunity in shaping how do we make a great thing like AI good for everyone, and we don't leave anyone behind. I think is easily said, but to put it all together and to make sure that no one is selfish in approaching AI, at the same time, ethically, we make sure it represents everyone, and it's not only looking at it commercially, you're also looking at it from a development point of view, from social impact point of view, and from people-to-people point of view. So I think I'm really excited on the outcome of this summit, and I look forward to some of the announcements.
Some of the announcements, I mean, I think, are we going to see some new multilateral processes get deepened here? You know, UAE recently signed up to the Pax Silica, right? So there is an international arrangement, still new, still fledgling, but emerging.
Well, yes, UAE signed up for the Pax Silica, was one of the initial members of coming into the Pax Silica. I personally, I represent UAE in that signing. I personally want India to be part of this. So I hear that India is joining. Hopefully the news will be out anytime soon. I think is very important, not only from a perspective of UAE, but it's very important, as I described, that India comes in because of what India offers. I think, you know, the earlier session talked about the talent available in India, you know, the number of engineers that you have. I think no one can venture into solving the AI puzzle without having India at the heart of it. I think the talent, the scale, the ability to embrace technology, also the openness, be it at the leadership level or at the corporate level. I think there is so much potential and opportunities that India can play through. And I don't think anyone like Pax Silica can be successful without having a country like India as part of it.
You mentioned the talent pool. I don't think many people would know that you have also a deep linkages to education institutions. You've been on the board of a few institutions. You are invested in the whole process of the knowledge industry. How are you looking at creating both human capabilities for this new age, but using technology to enhance human capabilities and creating a virtuous circle in some sense?
I think the starting point is not to be defensive. So UAE took the position of embracing. I think you know, having an AI minister in 2017 shows you how UAE approach things. I think we have embedded AI in our education. Today in UAE, most AI subscription are free for students. So in all schools. Schools are embracing AI across the board, but also we're balancing that with the risk of AI. So a recent law was issued for anyone below 13 years old not to be exposed to technology yet. I think the leadership saw that there is a threshold of age at which you expose technology to a young generation is important, where leadership should play a role. Now, this is an open discussion. Is it 13? Is it 14? But the UAE saw that at a certain point, there's certain skill need to be developed before you expose fully. But after 13, UAE has the ability to scale and expose fully into the education system. Also, partnership is another way. You can't do this alone, as we discussed. So UAE is embracing the education and health and other aspects of the economy through partnership and allowing mega players to come in, where UAE, we're conscious of what do we offer. So, you know, we offer capital, we're willing to invest. We offer energy, which is core to AI success. And we offer also what I call soft infrastructure, the ability legally to put the setup needed for companies to be able to protect their investment, their patents, and feel free to invest without any issues in terms of taxes, in terms of setting companies. So UAE does a lot in creating an ecosystem around any industry. And we feel that AI is you know, you don't have a choice. You can't just choose between AI and others. It's an industry that is coming. It's like a tsunami that you have to be ready for. You can't just sit and say, you know what, I can live on my traditional economy. AI is here, and everyone needs to be able to adapt and work through it. And you don't want to sit behind when everyone is actually embracing it. So UAE has wanting to take a lead position on this. Some of it, we understand that will be risky in terms of investment, but being in the ecosystem is very important.
Minister, when we, some years ago, were looking at energy transitions, green energy, solar energy, we saw UAE and UAE funds play a significant role in different places around the world, including the African continent, where perhaps you are amongst the largest investors in new energy solutions. Can we see UAE partner with others to build capabilities in geographies like you did when it came to new energy. So are you going to invest in building data centers and compute capabilities in these new geographies who might be left behind unless we actually invest in them?
That's right. You know, being biggest oil, one of the biggest oil producer, or energy producer, venturing into renewable is always a strange combination. But you know, we have recognized that, you know, as a country, our leadership has set the strategy very clear. We want to celebrate the last barrel of oil. That's what our president has announced clearly by 2050. So the date is a vision that anchors philosophy, how the country wants to look at things. How do you shift people from the status quo, the comfort zone? You know, you have enough oil that is being produced. You don't need to do much. You have great sovereign wealth funds. They're huge and growing. So if you look and analyze the investments, say, well, don't need to do anything. You know, it's a small population. They can live on the wealth of these. But the leadership says no. We need to embrace new technologies. We need to embrace the next oil waves. And really, AI is seen by our leadership as the next oil for us. We say this because we have lived cycles of commodity historically. So for people who don't know much about the UAE historically been 200 years ago as a pearl diving hub. So that's our oil. So if you go back more than 100 years, the whole income of UAE is based on pearl diving. And it was representing, I would say, 100% of the economy, up to the point where artificial pearl came about in Japan, you know, and killed that industry. Well, guess what? Our economy was not ready. And we lived 50 years after that before oil came. It was a lot of suffering. And it anchors well into the memory and understanding of our grandfathers and leadership. And as a result, we don't want to be caught into the same kind of situation where so we're looking at this from a strategic point of view. But I want to answer your, so UAE is not selfish about it. UAE wants to help others. So I was at the G20 meeting in South Africa, and we announced a $1 billion commitment to Africa into AI. Education, hospitals, and others. And it's really, it's work in progress where we're looking at how to involve others and not leave anyone behind. I think big countries who are able and who has the luxury should do that, and not only UAE. And I think this type of event should focus on how do we help others who don't have the ability to do it alone, and us together can help to make sure no one is left behind, not leave it for countries to do it themselves.
So my final question to you has two parts. One, what would you want to take away from the India summit as you go back? And two, as you take the summit home and host it in the next months, what would be the UAE vision for AI?
Well, am I taking the summit home? Well, let me say we're willing, and we will be more than happy. So that's for sure. But I like how you positioned it. I think I am excited to see how the leadership, when they meet tomorrow, see the outcome. But for sure, my expectation to see more engagement, more countries joining, multilateral activities. Pax Silica, for sure, I mentioned. I'll be very excited personally, and I think it's good for everyone when India joins, and I hope the announcement will be made tomorrow, putting no pressure on anyone to make an announcement. Like me hosting the AI conference is not, not making that announcement, but I will definitely support UAE hosting that. So I look forward for more alignment and less friction and less selfishness in looking at AI as a global solver of issues. And it brings a lot of challenges that require everyone to work together.
Minister, let's do a deal. We will sign the Pax Silica, you take it home, okay?
Done.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you, Dr. Saran. That was an engaging, insightful, and truly an AI for all conversation that has really set the tone for everything that follows today. We will now move to our first panel of the day, and I think its title says everything, AI for the World. May I please invite on stage Ernest Muibaze, Executive Director, Sunbird AI, Shiko Gitao, Chief Executive Officer, Kala, Shalini Kapoor, Chief Strategist, Ekstep Foundation, Mr. Amitabh Kant, India's former G20 Sherpa, Paolo Benanti, faculty at the Department of Moral Theology, Pontifical Gregorian University, Pushmeet Kohli, Vice President Science at Google DeepMind. This discussion will be moderated by Nidhi Singh, Senior Research Analyst at Carnegie India. May I invite all panelists on stage, please?
So, a priest, a member of a Nobel Prize winning team, India's former G20 Sherpa, and three of the most influential builders and scalers across India and Africa when it comes to AI walk into the ballroom at the Oberoi. This is either the beginning of a great joke or a great conversation, and I'm personally hoping it's a little bit of both. I'm Nidhi Singh from Carnegie India, and I have the privilege of moderating tonight's discussion on AI for the world. Now we're at a summit about AI, so clearly there's been a lot of conversations about models and compute and capacities, and those do matter. But I want to start this session by talking about something a little different, and that is that AI's central challenge is no longer invention. It's diffusion. So the question isn't, can we build powerful AI? We can. The question is, who benefits when we build this AI? Because right now, the gap between what AI can do in a lab or in a demo and what it does at population scale in resource-constrained environments is enormous. The infrastructure is uneven. The talent gets pulled towards a handful of countries and companies. The governance conversations are still happening relatively in the global north, and they're shaped by a relatively small set of stakeholders. So the most promising interventions that we hear about are stuck somewhere between pilot and unable to scale. At the same time, we have some people here on the stage with us that are proving that it doesn't have to be that way. And we're going to get into what it actually takes to make AI work for the world. So the idea here is that I want to quickly go through a set of questions for everybody on the stage. This is just the beginning of the conversation. And then we'll let the audience come in with some questions as well. So we'll start with the scalers and the builders. We'll move on to Mr. Kant, and then we'll save the easiest questions, which are questions of faith and science. So I'll start with you, Ernest. Sunbird has launched Sunflower, which is a multilingual model, and it outperforms most major models when it comes to the Ugandan language. What makes this so different is that you've actually built this using locally sourced data rather than the internet scale data sets which are in vogue right now. So, Ernest, what does this tell us about the assumptions that people have around what it takes to build an AI that actually works for the people?
Thank you very much, and thank you to ORIF for inviting me. I'm called Ernest. I've been in the journey for trying to make AI and machine learning work for Africa for quite a while. I think since 2012. When AI was not cool. There was a time when AI was not cool, and explaining what AI was quite difficult. So Sunbird AI is a social enterprise that tries to do AI for social good, but we try to do it in a very practical way. So practical means that we try to deploy and try to get people to use the technology. And this means several things. So back in 2014, we used to work with farmers. Farmers, and what we're building back in the day with very limited tech was an app that could take an image of a plant, a crop, and provide the diagnosis. And this was cassava. And the very first time we did it in the lab and it was working, it looked good. We took it to the farmers, and one farmer, a gentleman, got the app and took an image of his wife. And the result was a disease in cassava, cassava mosaic. And the guy said, no, this doesn't work. This just doesn't work. And we kept thinking, wow, that was not a thing we'd thought about, right? So I think the very first assumption is we do pilots and assume this will automatically scale. And yet the context is quite complicated to get right. So when we build the sunflower models, the early versions of building language tech 5 years ago, again, we thought it would work automatically. We tested it, and we gave it to people, and the very first word they type is hello. Translate hello in my local language. And it got it wrong. It got it wrong every time, because there are very many ways people say hello. And so I think context has been a really big thing to make things work. And what we did with context is, one, community. Go to the community, refine these models, have people test these models, and have people break the models. I think we had this session called Break the System, where we asked people to actively break the system, break the models. And this was very helpful in sort of making sure we build a system that works. I think that was one. The second was conviction, which is not something we've had here a lot. So I don't know how to define conviction, but you can think of work people do for 8 to 5. So if you're doing the thing 8 to 5, and then the people who are convicted enough to do it the extra mile to go past 5. And there's a way, and that's very important. This work is very, very hard to get right for people to use. And I think to have the right conviction, the right talent that has the right conviction, I think is very important. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernest. I just want to talk a little bit more about something that you've mentioned, and I think that will link to something that Chico's doing as well. You've talked about how there's an assumption that pilots will scale and what it takes to make something work. So, Chico, you've built technology interventions across health and employment, agriculture, payments in Africa for a long time. Some have scaled, some have not. Very simply, with all of that experience, what is the most reliable signal that you've seen so far that something is going to scale?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I'm really privileged to be in this room. And the one signal is something I think Prime Minister Sunak said. It's about, are we solving a problem? Yeah? Sometimes we build for our own feel-good feeling. Yeah? We're saying, and today, we've had it from the very morning, is we want to solve AI that is for impact, lifting the floor, not being selfish. I love what the uncle from Gates said. It's about models that will leave an impact. But what does impact mean? And I love that you use the word conviction. It is about being able to solve something for the other person. And sometimes that hurts for you as a builder. And I'm coming from a computer science background where we love building stuff, right? But if somebody cannot use it on their daily use, it's not solving an actual human problem, and then at scale, then there's no way of saying that you're solving a problem, right? And that is how you do it. So for example, you talked about the farmer. And I'll give an example because I really want you to go to the AI village and see this one. There's a group of doctors who came to us and said, we are building all this nice model of like telling cancer prediction, talking about science in AI. But you know what? We're not solving the actual problem. When a mother is sick or is about to give birth in a rural farm in Kenya, what do? They call their motorcycle driver to take them to hospital. Most of the time, 40% of the time, the baby or the mother will die before they get to the medical space. What can AI do for that woman? And for us, it was like, we don't know. And said, yes, solve for how the woman gets to the hospital. And so they built this, honestly, it's a very simple language, small language model that takes information from the medical directory, converts it into very, very simple language that anybody with this app can be able to provide fast aid healthcare, can be able to provide a woman with like fast response to be able to give birth, or to even take care of something like, what is it called, the high blood pressure when a woman is giving birth. And that's what AI should be. It should apply to things that are not solving for yourself, because when I'm saying I have a cancer model, it looks good on me and on my papers, but doesn't look good on the woman that is giving birth on the way to hospital. Thank you.
Thanks, Chico. I think that's a really good point around what successful AI looks like and how do we really measure the success of AI. So I think one of the things that I want to now bring around to you, Shalini, is that you've also talked about different models for AI success. And one of the things that you've talked about is how you have a lot of pilots that are coming up, but the success of AI isn't dependent on how many pilots you have, but on how many actually scale. So how many work, and how many can sort of be increased to something that works in a resource-constrained environment and it can still scale for the population. So can you tell us how much of India's AI ambition currently is stuck in what you've called this pilot purgatory? And what does that really mean?
Yeah. So what we did was we studied almost 500 use cases across the entire global south to understand the pilots across agriculture, healthcare, education, and 70 to 80% were still stuck at pilot level. They were struggling to go at production grade. And what does production grade mean? And we figured out that they are either struggling for data, the right data, localized data. It works somewhere in some region. It doesn't work in other region because everything has to be retrained, recreated, and that needs more compute, which maybe they don't have. It's struggling for multilinguality because something created in one region and it has to have multiple languages, so language capability into it. The third was accessibility in various forms rather than just like a smartphone. The voice AI, because people want to interact and talk in their language, in their mechanisms, or what they have been used to on, say, on feature phones where there's no internet connectivity. There was also a need of, and why pilots they remained at just at pilots and not at the population scale, is also because the safety benchmarks were not created based on what the localization need was, which means that today the safety benchmarks are driven, say, by the compute great models, but it is not in terms of, say, conversations, multi-turn conversations. Every model will be very good if you just give one question, but you continue and asking and do 3 different turns. So multi-turn conversation, and that too in a context of agri or in a context of healthcare. There is no benchmark, and there's a lot of work to be done in that space. So we said, okay, what we should do is we should spend our time in building these pathways for data in agri, data in health. And that's what we launched today. In fact, Nandan Nilekani, just before this session started at 3:30, he announced 100 pathways to 2030. Because once we have the pathways, thousands of use cases will happen. Thousands of use cases will lead to a population scale. I'll give one more example, which is of data. The data linkage and data silo problem we all have seen. We recently worked with Ministry of Statistics, the MOSPI, and we said, okay, 10 data sets. They are the ones, by the way, who create the GDP, and they have data from the source at district level, taluka level. So they know the consumer price index. They know the wholesale price index. Now that information is now, that data sets is now AI ready, which means it has a model context server in front of it so that it's accessible by LLMs, by agents to build more. So a new data economy can start. So a new linkage can happen between sectors. And that opens up, right from the foundation, it starts opening up. So these kind of innovations and these kind of pathways have to be created in data, in benchmarks, and that will power the real use case. One last use case which I want to talk about is Amul. I'm sure each one of you would have seen how Amul happens. today, because of Amul AI, which is Sarla Ben, a milk farmer, she has a choice. She has a choice to use feature phone because maybe her husband has the smartphone and has not given her. She can use a feature phone to talk in her language in Gujarati over a feature phone and find out why the cow has given less milk and what is the nutritional plan. She can converse in that so that she can give it to the cow and bring back the money in her pocket, which has gone down because maybe a cow was sick. So when AI brings money in the pocket of the people, then people will start adopting it. And that's the AI diffusion into society, which once taken care of through these 100 pathways will lead to population scale AI. And that's what is India's game actually.
Thanks, Shalini. I think from the comments that all three of you have made, we can see that there is, and this has been the theme for conversations for a while now, there's some need for collaboration to figure out how do you scale AI solutions. Clearly, there are a lot of really promising AI solutions that are built around impact, built with humans in the center, but how do you sort of scale that up, make that bigger, ensure that even in resource-constrained environments, even with the feature phone, people can have access to this. So as we talk about this, I am going to turn to you, Mr. Kant, as we talk about scaling and how to bring something to population scale. So India's DPI story, Aadhaar, UPI, India Stack, is one of the most referenced models when it comes to bringing things to population scale. But this was built on relatively mature technology. Can this open, interoperable playbook that we had for DPI really work for AI when it evolves a lot faster, when there's not as much collaboration between the people who are building it, and it's not really that well understood even by the builders of AI?
So thanks for that question. And so my view is that first and foremost that AI which is not multilingual, which is not low bandwidth, and which is not based on voice, will not lead to digital equity and will create great inequity in society. And the learning experience from India's digital public infrastructure is that we created an open source model, which is open API and is globally interoperable, because we created a digital public interest layer. And on top of that, we allowed private sector to innovate and compete. So India is the only country where PhonePe competes with Google Pay, Paytm competes with Amazon Pay on top of the digital public interest layer. What you need to do is to do a DPI for artificial intelligence. And that's important. Because, which would mean that you need three things. You need data, you need talent, and you need computing power. What the India AI mission is doing is it's saying that we will open up the government data sources through AI Kosh for all the researchers and startups. We will provide you computing power at subsidized rate, much cheaper than the western part of the world. And we will support 10 large language models to be built up in India. And that is the approach that is driving so that we can build an affordable and accessible and an accountable model which is multilingual in nature, and that is what Sarvam has done, which was launched today morning. So what this demonstrates is India's commitment that in the long run, technology actually leads to a lot of inequity in society. You're pumping in so much of resources, so much of computing power. What India's attempt is that you should be able to optimize it, you should be able to do sophisticated software with limited computing power. But ensure that this DPI for AI is able to transform lives of citizens, that you are able to improve learning outcomes, you are able to improve health outcomes, you are able to improve nutritional standards. You are able to remove and eliminate stunting and wasting. Anything which is not multilingual, which is not low bandwidth, which is not voice-based, AI is not fit for purpose for today's society. And to my mind, will lead to greater digital inequality in society. And therefore, the model for India is based on this. And once we transform the lives of the 1.4 billion people of India, we'll actually be transforming the lives of the next 4 billion people who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the global south.
Thank you, sir. The framing of fit for purpose models, I think, is a really interesting one, and it's a very important one, because we're not going to all be building the same AI models. We aren't all competing in the AGI race, and I think that's a very interesting framing to provide, that you need to build a model that works for the people and it's fit for purpose. We're going to break up the order a little. Pushmeet, I'm going to come to you first. So you were part of the team that's built AlphaFold. AlphaFold has basically taken what is multi-year, multi-million-dollar processes, and now you can have something that can take seconds instead. And then you've sort of made these results openly available, and it is essentially a scientific miracle to be able to do this. But building it has required the entire resources of Google DeepMind. So what do you think about this tension that exists, that you can have answers that now come in seconds instead of taking this much time and resources, but it did in fact take that much time and resources?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting sort of point to be made there, is that the technology requires big investment. And not just investment in capital, it requires investment in various different other resources. It requires investment of thought, of multidisciplinarity. It was not something that was, it was not a breakthrough that was just achieved by machine learning people working alone. It was a breakthrough which came about because machine learning researchers, engineers were working with biologists together to sort of overcome this grand challenge which has been standing for the last sort of 50 years. And why did we choose that specific problem? It was because it was a root node problem that eventually had impact across a huge spectrum of different domains. When you think about a model like AlphaFold, what it does, it allows you to really shed a light on the inner workings of biology. When you think about biology, you think, well, maybe it has some implications for drug discovery, and that's where the commercial impact comes from. But that's just scratching the surface. There are 3.3 million researchers which have used AlphaFold across the world. If you had told me that there are 3.3 million people who will be interested in AlphaFold, I would have not believed you. I mean, the fact that 3.3 million researchers around the world are using this specialized protein structure prediction model, it just tells you how far humanity has come. What is even more surprising is that 1/3 of them are in low and middle income countries. So that researcher who was working on Chagas, some tropical disease, a neglected tropical disease, who had no way to find the structure of this protein to tackle this problem, now can do it at the click of a button. What was taking millions of dollars, multiple years, a synchrotron to get the 3D structure can now be just downloaded from the internet for free. So that is amazing. There are 180,000 researchers in India who are using AlphaFold. And they're not just using it for drug discovery. They are actually developing new crops that are resistant to fungus. They're doing it for food security. They're doing it for decomposing sort of plastics and treating pollution. So you can look at the scale of what one single breakthrough can enable. Now the key question was the investment that was put in, and many people have asked me, you put in this investment, you did sort of 5 years of research, brought this multidisciplinary team together, and then you made it available for free. How do you make sense of it? And I think that it's very easy to sort of make sense of it. Because like if, I think the minister earlier was making this analogy of oil and you shouldn't be selfish. It's the same way. if you're building this technology and that technology isn't used for the impact, then it will not have impact. So you really, AlphaFold's impact on drug discovery, on dealing with plastic pollution, on sort of understanding biology came about because it was made available. And then we followed it up with specialized sort of companies like Isomorphic, which are specializing into sort of drug discovery. So yes, there is a lot of investment into AI and which is required to achieve these major breakthroughs. But at the end of the day, the main sort of focus will be on impact. If you don't get impact, then it's just a technology. It's just a toy. It's only when it is in the hands of people who are using it to solve important problems that the world is facing that it will translate into the real sort of benefit. Now, Mr. Kant actually rightly said, right, that you have to make this technology accessible so that it's accessible to the world. And I feel that there are two elements. When we talk about AI, we think about it as a monolithic thing, that is just one set of competencies. It's not. It's multiple things. It's a thing which democratizes expertise. It's basically democratizes high-quality education, high-quality healthcare, and for that, it needs to be accessible to those 1.4 sort of billion Indians and the 8 billion people on the planet. But at the other end of the spectrum, it's also about going beyond humanity's knowledge in terms of really figuring out what do we know about the world? How do we deal with new challenges in biology like future pandemics? How do we deal with sort of grand challenges of energy security? How do we deal with great challenges of dealing with climate change? And that's where the true promise of AI lies in the future.
Thank you, Pushmeet. I think for the last question, I want to take us to a much higher view of this. We'll go back up to a 10,000 feet view of what the challenges are. Father Benanti, I'll come to you now. So you've worked on the Rome Call for Ethics. In a world where there are almost as many ethics documents as there are AI pilots, that one stands apart because it became the first document that was signed by leaders of the three faiths alongside major tech companies. So in a world where values differ quite greatly, and they differ enormously across different cultures, is this sort of a minimalist ethical framework enough to actually change the behavior of people?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Well, let me start where it stops. We had the same confrontation last year, so it's like an ongoing journey. 1 year, exactly 12 months ago. Well, you know, we have a problem. And the problem is this. From 60,000 years ago, when for the first time our species take in his hand a clapstick, was it a tool or a weapon? Was it something to open much more coconut and give food to people and democratizing food? Or was a good weapon to open much more skull of people and being less democratic? So there is no way in which all the dream and desire that we heard can be given for granted to hit the target of innovation that means progress. And this is where ethics come in the stage. So we need some kind of guardrail, you know, that guide you to the goal that you desire. But when we talk about ethics, let me do a really Italian example, sorry for that. It's like when on Monday you are discussing on the soccer football match of Sunday. Everyone knows how the match has to be gone, but no one played it. So everyone is ready to judge someone else's decision, not ready to play in it. And here we have a problem. And the core element is this. You know, we are a lot, we are different. We have different sensibility. There is a set of values that are workable. Well, to make short a long discussion, no. But this is not an ethical problem. Why? Let me make, once again, on myself an example. Let me tell you a secret. I'm a Catholic. That's the secret. Well, thank you. Well, for Catholic, marriage is really important. But myself, I'm not married. So neither a really deep Catholic value is valid for every Catholic. So we have not to focus on value. What else we can have? Well, let's say something like, for example, norms. But a norms is something that is made to protect a value. If life is a value, do not kill is So also norms are not workable. Should we declare ourselves defeated? Should we renounce to the dream that we hear today? Not at all. There is another element in ethics really important. There are principles. So supposing that there is a fully autonomous car, and this fully autonomous car found itself in the unavoidable condition of having an accident. You don't know who you are in that scene. The driver, one man on the street, someone else. Make it sense that the machine tried to minimize the damage? Welcome to ethics. So ethics is a negotiation principle, and what we heard here are simple principles of use of things that are already inside us. So there is no need for an outside download of that, but we need dialogue. We need to dialogue among us to allow such kind of workable principle to be the guardrail to transform innovation in something that we can define as development and really progress for everyone. So my job is easy. I make the question, I don't give any answer.
Thank you, sir. I am cognizant that we only have 1 minute on the clock, so we will take one question from among the audience because I do want somebody to have a chance to interact with the audience. Do we have a question? Yes, over there.
I have actually a question for Mr. Benanti, because I know that you would like to leave questions, but I would like also one answer, please. Actually, what are the principles that you believe that AI should never breach? What are the values that, like, how do you even define values? How do you define principles? So how can we regulate or see how AI works if we don't know what is the limit?
Thank you for the question. I'll try to be super fast. Well, there is not a universal set of principles because there is not theoretical good. If you have a thirsty man, one good thing is to give him something to drink. So the principle is go in the face of his need. So because there is not a universal condition, you have to focus on the subject you are working on. On AI, well, the first thing is, for example, this idea that AI is a wonderful machine to find pattern in data and maximizing things, it's good. So let's discuss in this condition, in this kind of situation, what is the goal of what we would like to maximize. Then let's use AI to bridge us to that. And you can maximize, for example, the income of seed seller to people, and it's not good. Or we can maximize the amount of agricultural people to get from their own field. Well, AI is good in finding the maximum or the minimum. Not all are workable. There is no way to make ethics without discussing among humans. Short answer.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all of my wonderful panelists. It's been really exciting to hear about how everybody is building AI for the world and how we all have such different but more or less the same challenges, actually. Thank you.
Could I request the panelists for a group photo, please? Thanks so much, everyone, for a deep and insightful conversation. It is clear that the aspiration of AI for the world requires more than just good intentions. It requires architectures, investments, and above all, genuine inclusion of the communities it is meant to serve. We now move to our second panel of the day, From Vision to Velocity, Making AI Innovation Work at National Scale. Before we announce the panelists, I would like to tell the group that Her Excellency Sina Lawson's running late and will be joining us shortly. But in the meanwhile, I'd like to invite Dean Ball, Senior Fellow, Foundation for American Innovation, Mariano Florentino Cuellar, President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and the discussion will be moderated by Rahul Mathan, partner at Trilegal India. Over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Shruti. Dean, Tino, thank you for coming. We're in quite a remarkable phase of this journey. And the title is Vision to Velocity. So if you will bear with me, the vision which was articulated some time back was that if we keep putting more compute and more data, we will eventually get to some miraculous place, which some people call AGI, some people now are calling the exponential. And at that point in time, it says that this whole technology will behave in a way that no one could predict, and it would do wonderful, miraculous things. And over the last, I'm going to say even a month, we've had some articles saying that we're at the end of the exponential. It was not an article, maybe Dario said that on a podcast. Matt Schumer said something big is happening. There's a change in the conversation. And I wanted to start there because, you know, we say vision, and the question, and maybe I'll start with you, Dean, how far away are we right now from that vision becoming a reality? You study this closely. And there are many ideas as to how to get there. You know, Vision 2027 said that we would get there at one shot. And at the same time, AI is a jagged technology, so we'll sometimes get to the top and others we won't. I just wanted to, before we get into the velocity, have you set the stage, as it were, as someone who looks at this and plays with this a lot? How close do you think we are?
Well, thanks, first of all, for being here, and thanks for having me. So I think we're very close, and in some important sense, you know, sometimes this is referred to as transformative AI or powerful AI. I think we kind of have transformative AI today in certain forms, and I think it will become much more so. One of the things that's really an important signal for many in the industry, and me, you know, as an observer of it, is at what point will we see models that can contribute meaningfully to the next version of themselves? So can GPT 5.3 make GPT 5.4? We're starting to get to the point where that's happening. And it's happening right now in, I would say, relatively modest ways. But I would expect that the sort of feedback loop there is going to increase, will become more noticeable, and the pace of progress will pick up yet again. And obviously, it's already been quite fast. At the same time, you know, so I think in many ways, there are these like capability bulls, people like, you know, AI 2027, right? And I think in many ways, they've accurately predicted a lot of things about where the technology would be. And what they've been consistently wrong about is how weird it would feel. It would be like, oh, we have recursively self-improving AI, and therefore the world must be incredibly strange. And in some ways it is, yes, but in many ways it's not. In many ways, the world feels not radically different from 5 years ago, at least in, you know, with regard to technology. And so I think it will feel more continuous than it seems right now, and yet the technology will progress quite rapidly, and you'll never really notice it in any given day or month or year. But when we look back 10 years from today, we'll say, wow, an awful lot has changed.
Tino, as much as I sort of share Dean's sentiment that this is already quite remarkable, it's not evenly distributed. And I think the whole day we've sat here trying to understand how do countries around the world benefit from this miraculous technology. It's a thorny problem because I think there's issues of geopolitics, there's issues of capacity, there's you know, data and silicon and a whole raft of issues that are involved. But it's an important problem to solve. And I was wondering whether you have thought about the particular challenges of getting AI, which is currently being developed in a few corners of the world at this very, very high capacity, to the other corners of the world where, quite frankly, they need it desperately, but are not able to milk it to its full potential.
Great question, and let me start by thanking all of you in the audience for still being here. How many of you have been here longer than 2 hours? Okay. This is a great conference and gathering, but even if it is, it takes time and energy and attention and focus. So we're grateful that you're here. These topics are very important, and we need a conversation that is truly global about this technology. Let me start by building on Dean's point about how much it is hard to see the transformational impact of the technology, because if you're following developments, you see one thing, you see another, and quickly your brain habituates. But I want to just posit the following thing. If we had on the screen behind us a virtual person that was effectively a frontier model, it could easily take part in this conversation we're having. I would say it could easily come up with insights that the three of us would find pretty interesting. It could easily be prompted to take views that Dean and I might disagree with, but that might still be coherent and important. 3 years ago, that might have seemed like science fiction. And that's only the beginning. And in some ways, I just want to make this point because I do think part of what is holding back the technology is not any inherent limitation in the technology anymore. It's our willingness to play with the unfamiliar, to say, actually, in a panel like this one, we should have somebody who's going to take the opposite view, and we can create that persona now, in a few seconds, actually. And that's coming, and it's almost with us already. But to your point, I think that in the end, I look at the statistics. There's a study that I think came from Microsoft just recently, and it highlights that there is a divide in frontier AI use, as you might expect in countries that have the more developed economies and in emerging powers in developing regions. And it appears, I mean, these are early days with these data, but if anything, it appears the divide is growing, not shrinking. So what does that mean? I think it means two things. First, that if we do believe in the transformational impact of this technology, we have to ask hard questions about how giant investments in capital that are being made now are going to map on to use cases that are intriguing and interesting, but that often will involve large chunks of the world's population that may not be able to pay for that kind of frontier model. And the discussions that we're having here about, well, do you get models that are more efficient? Do you have a model for revenue and business that takes into account disparities in ability to pay? Where do governments step in, nonprofits, what kind of private sector models? But the second thing I think that means is that early in the days of this technology, right now, there are conversations about standards, for example, conversations about governance might be too strong a word, but about how we collectively develop this technology that have to ultimately be conversations that cut across a lot of borders, a lot of divides in order to include the publics that are ultimately going to be important in shaping where the technology goes.
I guess you're absolutely right. These, in the early days of the technology, in the early days of every transformational technology, there have been very fundamental challenges that we've had to deal with as a civilization. At this particular point, though, this feels like there is sort of a bipolarity that's developing in the world, and as the countries of the global south look to build out their AI capabilities, they're having to choose between two different nations that are building one very good, high-quality AI systems, others perhaps cheaper, but there are question marks that are being raised as to what the trade-off is to accept those models. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, we had a question in a panel somewhere else in the summit where they said that countries of the global south are going for where it is going to be cheap and efficient. And in India, and I'm not making too big a point of this, just take voice models. 11 Labs, cutting edge right now, will offer you a voice model. But India can do voice models at, I think, ₹1 a minute. That would, if it becomes popular in India, reduce 11 Labs' revenue from 300 million to 30 million. That's sort of the difference that efficient AI models that do exactly the same thing can generate. This is just voice, but if we're thinking about commoditized intelligence at a cheap price, then this is the trade-off that countries are going to make. And I was wondering whether we could just unpack that trade-off, because I think there is the latest, greatest, best thing, but there is the thing that everyone is going to use. And I wanted to lay that on the table for the both of you to try and figure out, what should countries think about? What are the trade-offs they need to make? And what's the immediate benefit vis-a-vis the long-term consequence? And if I know both of you probably have similar or different views, but if I could just throw the question to both of you. Maybe, Dean, if I could start with you.
Sure, yeah. So I think, first of all, access to the very best with something like intelligence is just kind of like, there's this question of like, is there such a thing as good enough? And I think if there is such a thing as good enough, I think for some things that will be the case, but the most exciting things we will do with AI will be daring things, will be ambitious things. And so good enough, there is no such thing as good enough there. You're going to be actually pushing the bounds of what is possible, right? And if that is something that, your country's government wants to do, or that researchers in your country want to do, or that entrepreneurs in your country want to do, then they're going to need access to the best, full stop. And I think the second point I would make would maybe be a slightly more technical one, which is just that there's this concept of distillation, right? Which is where you have a teacher model that you sort of impart lessons, essentially, to a smaller model. Now, distillation happens illicitly sometimes with some foreign to the US companies taking outputs illicitly from US model providers, but there's also a form of it that the model providers themselves do, where they will train the biggest and best model and maybe not even release it immediately, but instead, for every point along the cost curve that you want to hit, you can actually you can achieve better price efficiency by distilling from the efficient model, or by distilling from the big model. I think the last thing I would say, when it comes to this question of, I think open source, like one of the reasons I got into this field was to advocate for open source AI. It's extremely important. I think it's going to be a very important part of the industry going forward. However, I think staking a strategy purely upon open source AI, you're introducing some operational risk there, because there's a possibility, I would make a wager with you, which is that any company that achieves true frontier capabilities will no longer open source their best stuff. And so then you're back to paying a profit margin, and doing all of that. And I would also encourage you to think about economies of scale and think about vertical integration. A major thing, I worked in the Trump administration prior to my current think tank role, and one of the major things that we focused on was this notion of an export promotion strategy as opposed to an export control strategy. And this was all about building computing infrastructure and associated energy and whatnot all over the world. And I think that once you start to think about the power of vertical integration and economies of scale, very well may be the case that maybe in some naive sense, a open source model is cheaper, but actually if you do the economic math, it actually might not be the case. To roll your own, you might actually be better off going to a company. So I'd say the economic case is not as straightforward as it is sometimes presented in sort of civil society conversations that I've been a part of on the open versus closed. Open is going to be extremely important, but nonetheless, I think that real sovereignty and real control over your destiny comes from having access to the best, fundamentally.
I cannot disagree with my friend Dean, although I try to disagree with him sometimes. And actually, we do disagree sometimes. But on this one, maybe I'll distill a little bit if I could, no pun intended. It feels to me like it's important to realize that even in the more advanced economies, there is going to be demand for more efficient models, in part because generating that much power right now, if we stick with this compute, is expensive. It's also politically challenging because a lot of people don't want to live next to these giant data centers and they don't want the price of electricity to go up. They also, I think, see, many people, the value in business models where edge compute really is at the center of things, ironically, and you have really sophisticated functionality at the edge. And you can really only do that if you have really lean models. But here's where I think Dean gets at the heart of it, which is it goes back to recursive self-improvement. I think if you imagine a world where at some point scaling laws and just like, algorithmic innovation peter out and there's really no extra value in being at the frontier, and whether open source or not, like the more lean models eventually catch up, well, there's eventually this problem goes away. But I would not bet on that scenario. I think we're probably still quite a ways away if we ever get to the point where some mix of algorithmic improvements and throwing a lot of compute at something don't give you more and more capabilities that ultimately lead in the direction of recursive self-improvement and not in the direction of making those models available, or maybe you license them at a very, very high cost. So that, I think, will force the question for a lot of countries that are navigating a geopolitical environment that is not one that seems to favor like frictionless trade right now. Anybody who says to you like, well, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, no matter where these models are located, and the way, like the market will equilibrate the price and it'll just be fine. You can factor out the geopolitics. I don't know what world they're in, but they're probably not in our world right now, right? And I think that will push the discussion you're asking, where a lot of countries will ask, how do I invest in portions of the tech stack so that I'm at least able to get at the frontier if I really want to, for national security, for science and technology, for aspects of my economy where I just don't want to be dependent on another country.
So I'm going to push back on you slightly, Tino, because if you want to really participate in the tech stack, and you want to do this for sovereignty and national resilience, which ultimately is what you want to do, then you've got to go all the way down to the bottom of the stack, which is to silicon and to fabs. And it's just not economically efficient for every country in the world to set up a 3-nanometer fab, because you just can't do it, and it's just inefficient. And if you go all the way back up to the stack, then no one has $660 billion, which is what the big AI companies are spending this year, to build a large next generation of the foundation models. So I'm trying to tease out a question between the two of you. This is a fundamental challenge that the rest of the world has. And I feel that this challenge is because there is a lack of trust that we can, with certainty, be able to participate in the investment that is happening in one place in the world, with the assurance that every other place in the world will receive it. And so when I talk about sovereign AI and the need to build a sovereign AI strategy, it's not because I really want to set up a fab and have lots of jobs for people, which quite frankly is no jobs. These are usually dark centers. But I don't want the rug to be pulled from under my feet if I have invested in actually diffusing on the top of these various stacks. And maybe I'll go to Dean first because of the point that you made, which is the export strategy. And in order for me to buy into the export strategy, I need to be sure that that export strategy will always remain valid, having taken your point and built on top of it. And I'm going to give you the last word to end on that, Tino.
Well,
pressure.
One of the things I'm very excited about is that cybersecurity standards are a part of the export promotion executive order that President Trump signed from day one. Why is that the case? Well, I think I'm a policy person, but I'm a technically minded person at the end of the day. And so when I hear these concerns, which I think are totally legitimate, about sovereign AI and having the rug pulled out from under you, I want to find technical solutions to those problems. I want to give you cryptographic guarantees that, this data center is not phoning home to Washington, so to speak, right? I want to give you those kinds of guarantees. I think that this is actually an area where the incentives of the administration, under this administration, are to promote the export, and the companies also want to do that. And so incentives are aligned here. And so I think this is a problem that we can solve through technical measures. And I think that you've already seen some stuff from some of the corporate players. I think you'll see more of that. And beyond that, though, I think that owning infrastructure in your country, the way that the actual ownership is arranged, that can vary by country. But I think that the export promotion strategy sort of contemplates a wide variety of different ways that that might work, different ways that that might be structured. And so in that sense, you know, I hope that my view is that the US stack right now is by far economically the best option, technologically the best option. And so with these kinds of guarantees, and also I should also add, you know, with the prospect of development finance subsidy, loan subsidy on top of that from the US federal government, this is an area where, you know, the US government is as committed as I think one can possibly be to this prospect.
Yeah, just briefly building on that. At 20,000 feet, the problem you're describing, the problem Dean is addressing, is easy to solve. You can say, well, the US tech stack is very compelling for technical and for economic reasons, but if it's going to be widely diffused, there has to be trust. And that trust can either be built over a long set of relationships on multiple issues, ranging from trade to security, to culture, to democracy, et cetera. Or it can be built on the basis of a, I don't want to say transactional, let's say a more situation-specific arrangement where one country says to the other, you want to use our tech stack, we want you to use our tech stack, but the other country says, well, that sounds good, but under certain conditions. We want to be able to understand this part of the technology. We want this to be rooted in our society. We want to be able to make these decisions. But when you go from 20,000 feet to 2,000 feet, it gets hard and difficult. And I think one of the places where people-to-people diplomacy, understanding of shared interests, and the strong links between institutions across countries really matter is that if, let me just put it this way, if you want countries with some shared values, we can call it democracy or something else, to work together to keep a certain degree of strategic capacity in this area, with a lot of American technology, it's going to require some degree of understanding and exchange of interests.
Dean, Tino, thank you so much. This is, we could talk for hours, but I'm really glad that we could have this conversation.
Thank you.
I'm sorry Sina couldn't be with us, but thank you very much, and I hope you'll stay for the rest of the day, and we'll be able to chat with you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, panelists, for this engaging and practically grounded conversation. Our third panel for the day turns to a set of questions that talk about investments, trust, and adoption. I would now like to invite Eli Sugarman, Director of Special Projects at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Shiv Kumar Kalyanaraman, Chief Executive Officer of the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, Vaijayanti T. Desai, Regional Practice Manager for Digital and AI South Asia at the World Bank. This discussion will be moderated by Brad Title, Deputy Director, Program Advocacy and Communications, Global Health Innovations at the Gates Foundation. May I invite all of you on stage, please? Over to you, Brad.
Thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for being here. So my name is Brad Titel, and I am the Global Policy and Advocacy Lead at the Gates Foundation for our work on AI. And as my colleague Ankur said so eloquently earlier in this session, you know, our focus at the Gates Foundation is on how innovation can be applied to responsibly solve real-world development challenges at scale. So our goals are around, you know, a world free of infectious diseases, ensuring that no mother or child dies from a preventable cause, that hundreds of millions are lifted out of poverty. And we're really interested in this conversation because of the potential for AI tools to dramatically accelerate all of that. Now, AI can strengthen the systems that deliver that impact and public services ranging from healthcare delivery to supporting small-scale farming and the institutional infrastructure that underpins that, but it requires systems to deliver it. And the promise of AI is enormous, but beyond the technical we just heard about, AI impact hinges on whether AI tools and those systems are trusted, on whether they're sustainable from an economic perspective, and whether they're deployable in real-world contexts. So this conversation is about the mechanics of impact. So how do we know, as funders, many of us, what to fund and what is worth sustaining. How is trust built with the communities that ultimately AI is going to be serving for those use cases? And what does it really take to move to durable scale that can actually be sustainably financed and sustained over time? And how do we ensure that AI solutions are built on that digital public infrastructure rail that we've heard about to ensure that they are equitable, efficient, and effective, and able to build on the type of infrastructure that, for example, India has built so well? So to explore these questions, we brought together panelists who sit at different stages of that AI value chain, from research funding in terms of Shiv Kumar, to catalytic philanthropic investment with Eli, and to large-scale public sector delivery with Vijayanti. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn to them. And I'd love to start by really just asking each of you, from where you sit in that AI value chain, let's talk about the challenges. What do you think most often prevents AI or strong AI research or pilots from evolving into scalable systems and that deliver scalable, measurable impact? And I'll actually start at the sort of the downstream end with you, Vijayanti, and ask you to go first.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eli, for this wonderful introduction. As evidenced by just the traffic, it took me over an hour. I think the surge in client demand and interest is really taking off quite a lot. And while we see our clients, country clients, really ask us some questions about how we can help and how they can consider and be much more intentional about this journey, I think we're all still learning. So I think we need to be a little bit humble about the approach that we're all taking, which is we're shaping it as we learn and go along. But it's really around three areas. One is the fundamentals still are important, because you can't think about AI without some of the foundational digital infrastructure. And when we think about the importance of last mile broadband connectivity, data infrastructure, some data governance around data classification, data protection, and others, the digital public infrastructure investments. These are all foundational infrastructure that still doesn't exist in a lot of our countries. When we think about the support we're providing in Bangladesh for last mile broadband connectivity, you have less than 10% of fixed broadband. Or the support that we're providing in Sri Lanka, thinking about data classification and different public-private models for data infrastructure and cloud credits. When we think about device affordability, South Asia is the second to Africa in terms of a large usage gap, 50% with large usage gap, with device affordability being one of the key constraints. And we're only hearing from manufacturers that device affordability is going to get worse off than it is better, with the memory costs increasing exponentially. So I think one is just continue to focus on some of those core digital infrastructure needs. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about really thinking a little differently and evolving and trying to see how AI adoption and usage can be supported. And I think that's where we need to think a little bit differently. One is around de-risking and blended finance, and the other is around more pooled financing. So when we think about de-risking and blended finance, this is where a mix of philanthropic funding, concessional funding, together with some of the MDB funding can really take off with AI adoption. So we are starting to do that with AI sandboxes, really helping countries think about, and here in India and a couple of states, but we plan to scale that up across the region for early stage piloting, experimentation, also learning as we go along with evidence and research alongside that. But then as that learning and experimentation, that we then infuse that into some of our projects where we support that can be scaled through our MDB financing. And I think the second and then just the last is on pooled financing. I think India has shown with the AI mission what's capable in terms of cloud compute and being able to think about the pooled demand and then bringing down the costs. We know from experience, whether it's Gavi or other types of models, where you can consider how that type of model of pooled demand and then bringing down and bringing in and leveraging private sector, and think about whether we can do that for GPUs as well.
That's great, thanks. And you mentioned de-risking and the catalytic needs and turning to our philanthropic funder. Eli, I'd love to hear from you. Like, where do you see the biggest bottlenecks in terms of trying to turn the type of investments you're putting resources into scalable systems?
No, it's a great question, and thank you for asking it, and thank you to ORF and Carnegie and the organizers for having me. So I think we're a strategic philanthropy, and so what Hewlett does is really we tend to invest in ecosystems. And so we look for civil society partners who are trusted by the communities in which they operate, and really have the local knowledge and the built relationships to really work with the community and stakeholders to identify what is the problem they are trying to solve, leveraging AI or a discrete emerging technology, and then work to assess, do they have the technical acumen to then translate that technology to make sure that it's actually being deployed properly to solve whatever that need or use case is. But really it starts with are they from the community? Do they have the trust to actually then try to then work through, is this going to work? Is there going to be uptake? How do we overcome whatever the obstacle is? How do we get buy-in from the local government? Again, there are a range of obstacles that can be faced. But for us, it really starts with assessing and diligencing who is that civil society partner, and do they have all of the attributes and the proven track record to start tackling problems? And then the technology is but one tool to try to achieve that change. And so that's more our approach. I realize other philanthropies start with AI as a solution that should always be at the forefront to whatever problem is being tackled. We view it as one of the many tools in the toolkit of the civil society groups that we support around the world, and a very exciting and novel one, but want to sort of say that we are not, techno-solutionists, right? There are socio-technical challenges, and you always need to think about the socio, and that's where a lot of that diligence comes in to make sure that the civil society organization has the relationships, has all of the wherewithal it needs to solve a hard problem.
And Shiv Kumar, you're a research funder, and ANRS was created to help strengthen the research ecosystem in India. So where are you seeing those bottlenecks and the need to bridge between upstream research and the ability to translate it into durable solutions?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. See, ANRF has different tools in the toolkit. We fund primary research in just similar to the National Science Foundation in the United States. That's broad-based national research in terms of AI fundamentals. Our line ministries like MITI support large foundation models that are being announced today as part of the India AI mission. And then what we do is we are looking at specific areas to accelerate in what we call a mission mode for research. And there we are picking topics such as AI for science and engineering. That is looking at the AI and the intersection with science and engineering, and I was moderating a panel today morning about that as well. So that's one example. Similarly, we are working with you folks on the Gates Foundation on medical technologies, medtech, which embeds AI as part of it. And then there are other areas. We will be doing programs around drones. We are going to be launching a large program around societal innovation, but looking for leapfrog demonstrators in these areas. So, and of course, we also fund translational research and centers and the like, and broad-based centers at the intersection of humanities, social sciences, and science and technology. So we're taking a multi-pronged approach, but in these accelerator or mission mode programs, we are trying an alignment approach, which is to take all of society and all of government together. The way we are doing our MedTech program is where ANRF co-funds along with ICMR, which is our Council for Medical Research, alongside you folks, to aggregate capital and also aggregate the best of ideas. Similarly, in our AI for science and engineering, we have multiple partners, including several science departments, MITI, and so on the government side, but also many private sector partners. In fact, we are announcing Google, NVIDIA, and Qualcomm as additional partners in this in the AI Summit as well. So we'll be broadening and deepening our connection. So the view again there is the different partnerships help us align on different direction. The partnerships on the government side help us ensure there is policy alignment. The partnerships on the private end side ensures that there is scaling alignment on the private and technical side. And then the rest of society ensures that civil society has the right buy-in as well, right? So this is the approach we are taking in these techniques.
And I'm actually going to go backwards now from research back up to deployment. Stick with you, Shiv Kumar. I know you may have to step out a little early, but verifiability is really important here, right? We need to make sure that whatever tools we're investing in are proven, including in real-world settings, and that the right incentives are there and the right assurances that when governments invest or any investor takes up these tools, that they're doing it with the evidence in mind. So I'd really be interested to hear from you, how do you incentivize sort of the research ecosystem and that translation from research to tools to ensure that it is backed by evidence and that verifiability is there?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I mean, AI is going through a phase where there is different levels of trustworthiness that is being insisted upon as part of the overall trustworthy or responsible AI principles. I think and also there is constant feedback from the user community and the adopter community on what is the level of trustworthiness, what is the level of verifiability that is happening as well. So when we are funding research, I'm not taking too many a priori bets about verifiability. We just ask for scientific validation. We ask for enough field trials for ensuring that it is well grounded. But once it goes to the private sector to translate upwards, we have an RDI fund, which is a 1 lakh crore fund, to help drive and scale up that. We expect a lot more scrutiny into that aspect. So when I'm funding things at a much more foundational level, I'm more looking at focusing on the opportunity and being mindful of the risks. But I think the valley of death or the translational portion is where the rubber will meet the road fully about this.
Great. Well, trust and feedback certainly brings us back to you, Eli. And your work, I mean, Hewlett has invested in a whole suite of open reusable AI safety tools. And I'd be really curious to hear from you, what have you sort of learned about investing in trust and the ability to actually build it through investment, through that kind of engagement? But also, how do you think those lessons might translate to those other enablers that are critical here, such as data governance standards or other tools?
So it's hard, right? I mean, getting this to work at scale is a challenge that I think we all face in different ways. So I think a few lessons. I mean, one is there was an earlier conversation, I think, around multi-stakeholderism and sort of who you engage, who has a seat at the table, who do you bring in early to help co-create and to use the tools and to define the parameters is obviously key. And so the more that you learn how to do that and both have enough of a theory of the case that people will know that you're serious and want to engage, but then also can help shape it materially and striking that balance is obviously one of the most challenging ones. I think as far as, how do you actually build open source tools and things that are then used at scale, finding innovative partnerships with companies who oftentimes have expertise about actually building production quality software and tools and find a way to actually work creatively to either get some of that data, some of those initial tools, then to sort of open source and make them more broadly applicable and more broadly accessible, democratize them. There's sort of interesting models where I think learning from the past of open source and innovating to push it forward in the sort of for the AI world. And I think one of the challenges that we haven't yet squared yet is sort of what is the business model, for lack of a better term, of how do you sustain some of these open source projects? And the traditional model of sort of open source and sustaining open source software is not exactly what we need for this moment, especially if we want to democratize access, empower communities, and realize that those who are going to contribute and do some of that work, even if it's a passion project, it's a bit extractive if you're not paying people for their time and their effort, right? And so there are lots of trade-offs. And so I don't want to say there aren't really any easy answers, but there are, I think, interesting examples that we're learning from and trying to stitch together into sort of a sustainable, replicable playbook.
Great. And back to you, Vijayanti, with business models and sustainability. So you spoke a bit about blended financing, de-risking, and how we can sort of get from that pilot stage to scale, but we have to keep it at scale. And so I'm curious in your work at the bank, when you're working with governments to enable the kind of financing that helps them get to scale, but also advise them on how to keep it at scale, where do you see opportunities in the system? And we keep coming back to this interconnectedness between DPI and AI. Are there any sort of lessons there about how we can really use DPI to create efficiencies to keep things going in an economically sustainable way?
I think there's a lot of learning from the past decade of helping countries think about how to approach DPI with open, modular, interoperable, and for public benefit. And there's still a lot of learnings. I don't think we're there yet in terms of applying some of that learning to AI. And I'm looking at some of my friends here in the front who I'm sure can help shape that thinking. I mean, when I see sort of the layer above now DPI, we're talking about open network stacks, and I just saw today, I mean, I know in Maharashtra with the Mahavista, and now more broadly, the open network for farmers who are being able to access advisory, but also think about market linkages, creating that layer above DPI, which is also then open, interoperable, and can crowd in private sector. I saw today the similar approach with the power energy trading approach in India as well, which is amazing. I mean, it's really democratizing buyers and sellers to be able to receive and sell power, and it's that empowerment, but it's also, I think what's different is it's a layer that allows public and private to come together in a meaningful way, but in an open and competitive and interoperable way, where different companies can come in and out and be swappable in many ways. And so I do hope that we can collectively come together in the same way that many philanthropic institutions, development partners, countries came together a decade ago to really shape the thinking about the approach so that we can see the same mindset when we approach AI use cases.
So I loved how one of the previous panels tried to open it up for questions to the audience. If we have a microphone, I'd love to see if any of you have a question, otherwise I can keep going. Anyone have a question for our panelists? Please.
I want to go back to my name is Madhukar from Co-Develop. I want to go back to the question of what is global cooperation looking like, which is the theme of what you have here. We haven't quite discussed the global cooperation, but I would love to get some thoughts.
Cooperation?
Global cooperation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious. So what does global cooperation look like? And you obviously all touch it at different levels, so feel free to speak to any of your perspectives, research, philanthropy. We obviously do a lot of work as philanthropies together, or from the bank's perspective. Who wants?
Yeah, from the ANRF perspective, we are partnering with non-governmental partners a lot more than governmental partners, so including the Gates Foundation, we have the Wadhwani Foundation represented here, and many others we are exploring partnerships with, and I mentioned many multinational companies that we are partnering with. So that's been the focus of my strategy personally on the short run, but my colleagues in the Department of Science and Technology or other DBT, etc., they do government-to-government partnerships, and we coordinate on bridges between these. So together, we provide a single face and overall global partnership. So I'm quite pleased at the the set of partnerships we have put forward, and we would certainly welcome a lot more partners to work with us as we go forward. So we're very open.
Please.
So I think there's many ways of cooperation when I think about research. So we are also engaging in more impact evaluations and early evidence as we do some of these pilots and sandboxes and partnering with various academic institutions. I know JPALS also has a large cohort of partners thinking about research. So I think that's one we certainly should come together. The other is on thinking about de-risking, what organizations can come in with concessional grant funding, thinking about early experimentation and piloting. And I think one of the things that I heard Pramod say yesterday, which is it's not just taking the pilots and then seeing how it can scale, but also thinking about how we can build with scale in mind and how we can come together, as I mentioned, in that respect. And then I think similar, like pooled funding around what I mentioned, aggregating demand. And it's not even just the Gavi model, but it's also even scaling solar in the World Bank Group, where we pulled demand and thought about a mix of different instruments, whether it was advisory to governments, then bringing in private sector, but then also stapled finance. And so I think there's a range of public and private actors that can come together. But in the end, I think we need to be humble. I repeat this again over and over again, because we all still are learning. And I think if we have that mindset of learning as we go, researching, understanding the evidence, and then being iterative, and I think then we have a lot to achieve.
Eli, please.
No, and I think international cooperation is obviously critical, right? I mean, this summit is one of the many vehicles to channel and accelerate that cooperation. And on the funding front, if you think about the summit last year in Paris, Current AI was one of the largest outcomes, which is a very innovative donor collaborative that involves governments, the private sector, civil society, to try to build, all sorts of infrastructure and resources to benefit society to leverage the positive power of AI. So I think this is going to be a very interesting year for international cooperation on AI more broadly, given the range of really important events and global convenings that are happening. And so I think we are one of the many funders just eager to continue to find new channels for cooperation, to find opportunities to co-fund, to seek out pilots that we can collectively work on, to de-risk all of the things that my fellow panelists have mentioned.
I think we have time for one more, if anyone else from the audience wants to ask a question. All right, I'm happy to go. So a little bit of a lightning round. Feel free to keep these short, and if we have time, I'll throw out a couple more. But sort of what's your one big idea? Like if you could snap your fingers in your work, and whether it's create the pooled fund, not to steal your big idea, or de-risk something, like if you could make that thing happen that would help in your work move from the pilots you're looking at to something scalable, what would it be? And I'll just go down the line this way.
I'm just going to repeat myself. I think it's really a paradigm shift of building with scale in mind.
Yeah, I would say collaboration for impact, whether it's collaboration at the capital side or collaboration on the execution side. I think that would be the key, and that's our North Star.
I think we slightly need a third way or a different approach on how we think about philanthropic funding on AI, given that there are a couple dominant viewpoints that are somewhat tribalized, if you will. And I think trying to find an approach that can weave together different views and articulate a bit more of a shared agenda instead of somewhat divergent areas of focus. And that may be a little philanthropic in the weeds, but I think that type of strategy and more aligned approach across a wide array of philanthropic funders would be quite transformative.
All right, we have a little time, so here's one more. What would be one piece of advice you would give governments to say, if you want to make this work, this is the best thing or the one thing I would advise you to do first? Well, we can go the other direction. Eli.
Okay, so I mean, I think show curiosity and sort of be humble, right? I mean, it's always hard with novel technologies to fully understand them and to keep pace with them. And I think that government in a democracy is the representative of our citizens here in the United States, wherever the case may be, just really being open to learning and really to push the envelope. We've had some great government officials across the summit speaking, and I think they are a testament to how that is becoming more of the norm as opposed to the exception, but I think continuing to do that is one thing I would encourage.
Shiv Kumar?
Oh, I'm come from the private sector to the government. I think one of the key things I'm trying to do is to do few things, but do them really well, as opposed to trying to do many things and doing them badly. That's my key takeaway.
It's good advice for life. Please, Jante.
While thinking about all the possibilities and the excitement and energy around AI, don't forget about some of the fundamentals that are still required to make AI really achieve those, and put people at the center. I think continue to see how the new technology can really improve people's lives with human-centered design.
I think that's a great note to end on, because I think all of us agree that everything we're trying to do on AI is ultimately about impact and sustainable impact, and that takes work. So thank you all, and appreciate it.
Thank you so much, panelists, for this timely and important conversation. We now come to our final panel of the day, AI diffusion, the path forward. The most powerful AI system in the world is only as valuable as its ability to actually reach people. This panel brings together voices from telecommunication regulations, frontier AI development, technology investment, and foreign policy to ask, what will it actually take to get AI to the last mile? I would like to invite Seth Center, former acting special envoy for critical and emerging technology at the US Department of State, Elizabeth Kelly, head of beneficial deployment at Anthropic, Fahim Ahmed, group chief marketing and communications officer G42, Natalie Black, who's running a little late and will join us in about 10-15 minutes. And this panel will be moderated by Shankar Marwada, co-founder and chief executive officer of the Ekstep Foundation. May I please request panelists to come on stage? Over to you, Shankar.
Okay, good evening. Natalie is stuck in traffic, but we'll get going. We are the last panel, but like they say, always save the best for last, and we'll have some fun time. Okay, AI diffusion, the path forward. Oh, sorry. Okay. Many of you would have read this book by Jeffrey Ding on the diffusion and how he analyzed it. When I read it, what I found fascinating was that France out-invented Britain in the first industrial revolution, yet Britain won that race. Britain out-invented US in steel and some other industries. Germany out-invented US in chemistry, yet US won that race. Invention is not equal to impact. And the crucial point that he makes there is the missing layer, the crucial layer between invention and impact is the layer of diffusion, which is how does great invention, great innovation diffuse its way throughout society and not just concentrated in the hands of a few companies, in a few individuals, like it was in France in the first IR, or in Britain in the second IR. It was personally insightful for me that it is US which invented the idea of engineering. Britain had better steel makers, Germany had better chemists, but chemical engineers were more in the US. They helped to diffuse it. A second important thing was the connect between demand and supply, applications and innovation. And there was a rapid feedback loop which allowed the diffusion to happen much more. A strongly recommended read because he ends with a prediction on what will happen between US and China in the AI race. I will not tell you his prediction, but do read it. We are again in some kind of a crossroad here. If we let a natural diffusion happen in AI, there is a risk that it may be concentrated in a few countries with few companies. However, we have an opportunity to have AI serve the most, serve everybody by many. Today's discussion would be on the tensions and challenges between these various paths. I want to begin with you, Elizabeth, because the spotlight is on Anthropic for good reasons. As AI capabilities grow, there is this tension between accessibility and safety. How do you think about the trade-offs between openness and control? You have a definitive point of view. And as the global head of beneficial deployments, I remember in our panel yesterday you said it's the most fun job you could imagine, right? What does it mean when stakeholders have different definitions of what beneficial deployment means?
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed crew. First off, what I'd say is I think there's a lot of overall consensus about what does beneficial mean. How are we using AI to accelerate scientific discovery, and find new treatments or cures for neglected diseases? How are we improving educational outcomes and bringing every student up to grade level? How are we ensuring that everyone is able to get access to world-class medical care? These are a lot of the things that our CEO, Dario, talked about in his Machines of Loving Grace. And I think we can all agree that these are things that we want to see in the world. The real divergence is oftentimes on the how, not the what. And we firmly believe that beneficial should be defined by local expertise, not by AI companies. The most durable deployments start with the communities they serve. Just this week, we announced a partnership with Pratham, a large Indian NGO known to many of you. They serve 8 million students. They've been working for 30 years in India's most underserved community. They have 10 plus random control trials behind their methodology. They set the pedagogical agenda. Anthropic provides the capability. And this is true of every partnership we engage in. The beneficial deployments team is really focused on how do we help address the highest impact use cases the market alone won't reach in health, in agriculture, and education. And core to actually achieving this mission is making sure that we are helping further open interoperable infrastructure. Anthropic was sort of the father of the Model Context Protocol, recently donated to the Linux Foundation, which lets organizations connect their data and services to AI without vendor lock-in. This is a huge unlock as we think about openness. India's Ministry of Statistics actually just released the first government MCP, letting users of any AI service access authoritative national statistics. That's sovereignty-preserving infrastructure working in the real world. We're also very focused on how do you build technical capacity, not just access, because we believe that's what creates structural change. That's how we've organized our team, where we're really focused on building out teams of applied AI who are working with nonprofits, with global governments, with higher education institutions, to think more creatively about what are the tools they can build on top of our API, and in the same way that we would do that for our enterprise customers, providing these resources based off the impact these organizations can have in the world, rather than the revenue they're driving for us. We see this time and time again with Claude Code 2, where you have organizations like Adalat, another terrific Indian nonprofit that has built on top of our API a new helpline for people who are navigating the justice system here in India, where they can get real-time feedback. With Claude Code, they were able to substantially increase what their engineering team could build and create a pipeline of new things building going forward. So open infrastructure, building capacity, all of these are going to be key.
Thank you. I'll come back to a couple of points there later. Seth, you worked on technology policy across borders. As AI is spreading globally, what are the biggest challenges you see? Specifically, how do national interests and global cooperation fit together in today's world?
Thanks, Shankar. And before I answer that, I would like to thank ORF and Carnegie for being unbelievable partners in all elements of technology thinking around the world, both in terms of thinking through global South issues and also more narrowly for my own parochial interests, the US-India relationship. And so thank you. I'm glad you started with a historical perspective on diffusion and a recognition that invention does not necessarily translate into enduring advantage. What is striking to me, I have the benefit now of reading books because I'm not in government anymore, and also teaching about what I read. And one thing I've thought hard about is this question of diffusion in relationship to national interests, but also diffusion in relationship to the compression of time. What is profoundly interesting and important right now is that there has never been a general purpose technology that has diffused more quickly in a more compressed period of time to more people. And so part of my reaction to much of the current debate and discussion around AI in the world as a historian is one of head scratching. took 56 years to achieve market penetration of the telegraph, 31 years to achieve market penetration of the telephone, 15 years for the internet, and if you use the same metrics, it's been 3 years for advanced AI in the world. So when we think about this, why is that the case? Everyone frames the concern around fear around concentrated power and a single nation or a couple nations husbanding that power. That has not actually been the case whatsoever over the past 3 years. There are multiple, dozens probably, of incredibly capable models that would outperform last year's model available right now at a relatively low cost. There are multiple companies from multiple countries, including in the Gulf, that are now working very hard to achieve advanced capability. So there's a dynamic commercial competition to push models out. And so what we're seeing is this incredible phenomenon of access to a technology in a compressed period of time on a global scale, unlike anything we've ever witnessed before. Is there a national interest component to it? At the frontier, at the edge, at the limited set of capabilities that would concern a nation? Absolutely. Is there legitimate concern around the extraordinary training costs and the infrastructure required for specific models? Absolutely. But on balance, overall, if we all look at the world, almost every region of the world, and we think about distribution costs of getting an advanced AI model around the world, access to that model, the amount of knowledge generated by that model, we are in an unprecedented period of technology diffusion.
That's really heartening to hear. Fahim, he set up the thing for G42. You work across a range of markets, and some of them face unique challenges. Some of these regions face unique challenges like infrastructure, regulatory frameworks, talent pools. What strategies do you see that are working?
First, I want to pick up on what Seth said and probably take us back to 325 BC. Because we pretty much had the same conundrum with Socrates and Plato, where Socrates strongly believed that by advocating the idea of writing, humans are going to degenerate because they would transfer that thought on paper. And it would be an existential threat on humanity. And here we are, 2,300 years later, pretty much looking at AI with the same lens. But since then, humans have evolved. To answer your question, I'm going to kind of focus first on UAE, which I think is a good use case of AI diffusion, because UAE's been at the helm of AI not when the world woke up to it in September 2024 on the back of ChatGPT, but back in 2017. That is when we had the first AI minister of a nation, the first in the world. That's when we had the first AI strategy as a nation, back in 2017, which people don't realize that we've been at this for a long, long time. So the United Arab Emirates has been an absolute sandbox on radical discovery using AI, both fundamental and applied. And since then, there's been a lot of advancements in government services, in medical, in financial, and so on and so forth. G42 has been UAE's national champion on all things AI. And we had a fundamental theory that we ascribe to and still do, which is humanity really failed with the invention of electricity. We failed because there's still 40% of human beings who do not have access to continuous 24 hours of electricity today. It has created the world of developed, developing, underdeveloped. It has really created that divide. So as we, as humanity, move into the age of intelligence, can we afford to have that asymmetric division? Our thesis is not. because it's going to create world disorder and chaos. If that's the case, we really need to advocate for the concept of the intelligence grid, and we're going to fix it this time. And this is something that we had presented at the World Economic Forum back in 2024, getting diffusion, getting adoption across the globe, rather than getting into the crossfires of whether it's in the US or China or just those two nodes. And everything that we have done is based on that principle. We're doing a lot of advanced work in countries in the ASEAN, in India, in Africa. Just recently at the World Economic Forum, we introduced the concept of digital embassies. So this is a way where if nations, countries don't have the power or don't have the capital, based on the capabilities that we are building there in the UAE, they can get on to the age of AI and benefit from inferencing, from research, from compute, and cloud capabilities.
Without the concerns of sovereignty, all of that is taken care of.
With absolute sovereignty, because sovereignty was at the heart of everything that we did when we built UAE. The other aspect that we kind of stumbled upon, but now have developed, is we used AI on the English-Arabic translation and created the world's largest Arabic model called JES. Now, this has empowered 350 million Arabic speakers around the world, especially the youth, to get on to all the advancements on all things AI. And that's when we realized this is really about democratizing technology using the power of AI. So then we developed Nanda, which is a Hindi LLM, and that is now available as an open source. We've done one in Kazakh, and our plan is to do that in Swahili, Bahasa, Urdu, Farsi. That would empower about 4 billion people around our universe here to get on to the age of intelligence, which actually is not even being considered or spoken about in the conversation of all things AI. So that's where really diffusion happens.
Thank you, Fahim. That's a different perspective. And Elizabeth, as I promised, I'll come back to you on this question. How do we create incentive structures through regulations, through norms, that reward responsible deployment without stifling innovation?
So at Anthropic, we have this dual mission of both ensuring that AI is developed safely and responsibly, and two, that it's deployed in a way that really benefits all humanity. And so I would argue that safety and responsibility aren't actually in tension with market incentives. In high-stakes sectors like finance, like healthcare, we know that institutions won't actually deploy at scale unless there is that trust, there are those guardrails, there are that safety. That's especially true as we think about a lot of the work that we're doing in the nonprofit, government, and higher education sectors. An organization like Adalat that is supporting people as they navigate the justice system want to make sure they can have complete faith in the information they're providing. Same if you're thinking about a chatbot that's supporting people navigating health situations, or a teacher assisting students. I really think it's a false dichotomy to say these things are opposed, and we see it time and time again with our customers.
Yeah, that's a great point. As we are learning in India too, without safety, adopters won't trust AI because it's their reputation at risk. So there is a positive correlation between safety and deployment, especially at scale.
Can I just jump in on that? I think it's just not safety. It's about responsible AI at the core. It's responsible and ethical AI. And in that, it's not an add-on, it's not a bolt-on, but responsible needs to be within the operating system of organization, models, and systems. I think that's key.
Well put. In fact, as we've been working with various large institutions and governments in deploying AI, whether it be in agriculture or livestock or even education, what we're realizing is getting it right the first time takes a lot of effort. A lot of partners have to come together. There's so many unsolved questions, right? So that's why one of the states of India, Maharashtra, it took us 9 months and a whole bunch of partners, many of whom are in the room, to get it right, so that not just Maharashtra government, we also had a good sense that, I think we are good to go. You're better off taking that extra time. But having taken the extra time to achieve it in 9 months, subsequently, Bharat Vistar launched yesterday. Ethiopian Open AgriNet launched a couple of weeks ago. Amul launched last week. The diffusion reduced the compression time, compressed the learning time to 3 months, and then 3 weeks. That's what happens if you can create diffusion pathways. And that's why earlier in the day, a group of us came together and said that we need 100 diffusion pathways to 2030. What these do is they answer a lot of the questions that other adopters have. Somebody has gone down the path, has answered some of these riddles. Can I learn from them? But I have the agency, the choice, autonomy to choose which path I want. Yes. Which is why all of us, as we are crafting these pathways through the jungle, it's important for us to illuminate it for those coming behind so that they're treading on proven pathways to achieve whatever destination they want to reach. In that context set, I want to again provoke you. AI today is extraordinarily concentrated in the hands of a few countries and a few companies. Is this inevitable? Or are there mechanisms for a more equitable distribution and deployment of AI?
So you don't have to do much to provoke me. I really question the premise fundamentally in any sort of context in which you look broadly at how technology would normally emerge and develop in the world. I think that's really important to say. I also think, given how rapidly fast followers have developed models just beneath frontier capabilities repeatedly over multiple years now, we've seen this pattern repeat itself, with each time there being extreme hand-wringing that the next generation of models is the one that are not going to be caught up to. And every single time, someone catches up, and they catch up with less compute in shorter period of time, with extraordinarily more capability, that I hate to say there's technological determinism here, but there is technological determinism that whatever framework we have for concern around monopoly and consolidation right now is not going to, in retrospect, be what the phenomenon has been. Now, I think there are deft ways to think about this if you're a nation state trying to think about hedging your risks. The Prime Minister's strategy here in India, I think, is quite wise, almost brilliant, because he's taken a look at the structural realities of the economic situation, the structural realities of where hardware comes from, the structural reality around who's going to provide the most efficient compute right now, and decided he's going to pursue multiple pathways at once. He'll pursue his own sovereign GPU course at reasonable scale to make sure that developers who might not otherwise have access to large-scale models at high compute costs will have access in India. But at the same time, he's partnered in massive ways with the largest AI providers and hyperscalers in the world, US firms, to develop AI simultaneously. And both of those paths will be pursued. They're going to be intended for different audiences, and they're going to hedge risks in different ways in different time horizons. And what's important about that also is we can call it sovereign AI if we want to, but in reality, it's hybrid AI. It's integrated and blended AI. And that's what the future of national AI agendas will have to be.
Could you double click on that? The point about instead of hyper AI, it'll be blended AI. What could you elaborate on that?
Well, look, I mean, there is the approach of a full national AI stack that one could try to pursue. That is not going to work in almost every situation in the world because of how integrated global supply chains are and global knowledge chains are and global talent flows are. There is a model in which one controls the infrastructure but enables a non-national AI provider to generate the capability. There's a model in which the infrastructure and the compute and the model is controlled by a nation, but the outputs are not. And so there's going to be all kinds of different ways in which this operates around the world. The competitive genius of all of this is going to be markets will determine which solutions are best, and they won't be the same in every place. But I don't think the pessimism around being dominated by single large infrastructure compute projects and a few models is going to be the reality.
Can I build on what Seth said? I think what Seth is also trying to say is, as we get into this world, your question was, does power reside in one, two, or a few? I think the validation of tokenization might perhaps evolve into some kind of a blockchain validation where the source of truth is validated amongst many. So perhaps that's a concept that we need to look at as we look at tokenization of AI and agentic tokenization as well.
Okay. As we draw close to the end of this panel discussion, I want to go back to what this summit is all about. It's the AI Impact Summit and impact on people, planet, and progress. There's a very ambitious and inclusive goal that AI should impact all, welfare for all, happiness for all. And hidden in that is a clear assumption that we are stronger together. We are stronger if we collaborate with each other in ways that serve our national interests. As part of that, if you project, and this is a question to all three of you, as you project over the next 5 years, as you see the world ahead, what does global cooperation look like to you? What are the minimum conditions needed for global cooperation? Anybody?
Seth, you want to take that first?
I mean, global cooperation will be a recognition that relying, at least in parts of a national AI stack on another country or another country's companies does not represent a threat in almost any situation. I think that's important in the context of the rubric of sovereign AI. I think there is going to be a recognition that there are endpoints, though, to cooperation. We should not have some sort of illusion that there's going to be global AI cooperation. I think it's very unlikely that the United States and China create something like blended integrated AI stacks. I think that's not going out on a limb to say. And then the question is for everyone else, who brings the best capability at the lowest cost with the most trusted networks, the most trusted infrastructure that actually embeds safety in their AI models, doesn't just say they're embedding that safety, and then delivers those products to citizens.
Fahim, and then.
I think our thesis still holds. It's not to make the same mistakes again, like electricity. So it's the intelligence grid, leave no one behind, make sure the AI infrastructure is available for all, because you need that velocity, you need that diffusion to happen across the world. And similar to the language concept that we said, it is also important to get new knowledge into our thinking ecosystem, which has an innate English frame bias. So with more languages coming in, more cultural context coming in, it'll advance on sciences, on fundamental AI applications, on physics, chemistry, and biology that is so required for both people and planet.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I would echo that. I think it's going to be absolutely fundamental that we make sure that all of the models are improving their performance in local languages, reflecting local context, so they're actually able to benefit folks across the globe. And I think this gets back to the question of what is the role of the different actors in this space. Data sets in different languages, evaluations to see how models are performing in health or in agriculture like we're doing with Karya. Those are fundamental public goods where there's a role to play for the philanthropic sector in funding this work, for the hyperscalers in contributing, for anyone in picking up and using this. And these are going to be key unlocks and a key coordination that I hope to see.
Wonderful. As the old Chinese saying goes, may you live in interesting times. I think the next 5 years will be some of the most interesting 5 years we would ever had. Maybe if you meet back in 5 years, we'll see how it goes. But I'm really looking forward to this year in particular, where we should make a great deal of progress in the potential of AI turning into real impact. And many countries will try different things. We'll all learn from it. And hopefully, as a result of that, we will make some impact on people, planet, and progress. With that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everybody, for a patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shankar. Thank you so much, panelists, for this interesting conversation. And thank you to our audience who's been patiently sitting and waiting for dinner. But just before we break for dinner, we have a very short 5-minute segment to launch a landmark report on AI for the Global South, 12 critical questions for the next decade, developed by the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence with support from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, Microsoft, and the Gates Foundation. The AI for Global South report outlines 12 priority research questions to help shape a decade-long agenda for advancing more equitable and context-responsive AI ecosystems across the Global South. Please join me in welcoming Monojit Chaudhary, Professor of Natural Language Processing at MBZU AI, whose work over the past 15 years has focused on scaling AI for underrepresented languages and culture, in conversation with Shruti Mittal, Research Analyst at Carnegie India. Over to you, Shruti.
Hello. Welcome, Monojit, and congratulations on the launch of the AI for Global South report. So we'll dive right in. For those of us who may not have gotten a chance to look at the report, can you give us your elevator pitch for what is the report and why does it matter?
First of all, thanks a lot for giving us this forum to talk about this report. So as a pre-summit event to the AI Impact Summit, in December, we organized an event where the whole aim was to get transdisciplinary researchers who work on or deeply care about inclusion and discuss the problems in their areas. The idea was through that process, we will come up with research questions which will not take maybe 1 year or 2 years, but maybe will define 10 years of research path, number one. And number two, not 1 or 2 disciplines, maybe 10 or 15 disciplines coming together. So that was the imagination. And if you know Hilbert's math famous problems, which defined the course of mathematics. So it was that kind of an idea with which we did this event. And we had 40 brilliant experts from various fields like economics, of course, AI, computer vision, people who work on healthcare, climate sciences, AI safety, and so on. And they worked together, brainstormed together to come up with these 12 critical questions.
Wow, okay, so 12 questions will shape 1 decade. That's a very ambitious distillation. How did you get 40 plus researchers from different fields to agree on the same thing? That never happens.
So, yeah, that was hard. We sort of almost asked them to play a game. Like first, it's like, okay, come up with questions from your own domain that you think matters. Then we force them to divide into interdisciplinary breakout session where each participant was from a different area, and then they debated on the questions and tried to come up with synergies. Once they came up with these questions, we put all these questions together and asked everybody to vote. So it was a multi-step process through which eventually everybody agreed, and it was unanimous. It's not that, it was not majority vote or anything. Sort of everybody agreed that these are really 12 critical questions that we should think about.
Great, great. So I've gone through the 12 questions, and they they encompass data, they talk about sovereignty, and many, many important critical questions. But if there were two takeaways you wanted to highlight for every policymaker, researcher, and funder in the room right now, what do you want them to take away tonight?
Okay, so first of all, here is the report, and there is a QR code. There will be many copies there, but you can also go to our website, which is GitHub. AI4GS. If you search with that, you will find the website as well. And this whole report is there. So all the questions are important. So that's the QR code. You can get it from there as well. However, if I were to pick two questions, I would say one is, so I have been working in AI for 20 plus years, and I would not have come up with that question, which is that when we do any impact assessment, we have to do RCT, field studies, and typically these field studies would take 1 year, sometimes 10 years, right? Longitudinal studies. But AI evolves so fast that these are not possible. So what would be the new style of doing RCTs? And that's a brilliant research question, I think, because as an AI researcher, I can think of innovative ways of simulating RCTs, in silico RCTs, and it opens a whole domain of possibilities which alone each of the disciplines won't have come up with. So that's one of the questions. The other one, this is an odd one out, which is inclusion by disruption. I like this because it talks about this whole point of technology amplifies power. So no matter what, there will be, discrimination of some sort or the other. So maybe we should also think of, coming up with a systematic science of disrupting systems to show that here are the breakpoints, and it can be more systematized. And there are more to it, like how it can be systematized and so on.
Thank you. So this is my final question, and I think it's really apt for the gathering we have today and we've had all day, which is, what is it going to take for the Global South to be the engine that's driving where these answers come from, and not just sort of wait for solutions to come from elsewhere? What is it going to take?
I would go one step further, right? So I would say it's not that these questions matter for Global South. I think these questions matter for everybody, right? If you want to make AI inclusive, these questions matter for even if you are in Global North. Maybe the population that you are looking for is different. So, and interestingly, this came up with researchers who mostly are from Global South or are working or thinking about Global South. Now, if we're talking of large-scale technologies that also we have lots of, early signs and promises that it is coming from Global South, I think the biggest, benefit of, or the biggest point of Global South is it's a very large, heterogeneous young market. So as a result, all the problems of Global North plus lot more is here. So if you solve Global South, you take care of the whole world.
Thank you, Monojit. The report is out now. I would encourage you to read it. And the work begins now.
Thank you.
Thank you so
and
much.
I would like to call upon stage everybody who helped doing this. There are 40 of us. All 40 couldn't be here, but I think at least 10 of us are here. Sunena, Aditya. So Sunena was the co-chair with me of this whole event.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Monojit. We've come to the end of what has been a remarkable evening. The one big conclusion from the discussions this evening is that the trajectory of AI is not predetermined. The choices that we make now will determine whether AI becomes the most powerful tool for human progress in history or the most powerful mechanism for entrenching existing inequalities. With that, I'd like to offer my deepest regards and thanks to all the panelists, the partners, to all of you, and for those joining us online. Please join us for dinner, which is served right outside in the pre-function area. please continue these discussions outside. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and we look forward to hosting you again.